For the next session, I would like to chairperson Professor Pradeep Rabella. Presently, he is a senior consultant at Asian Institute of Gastroenterology, Hyderabad, past president, Indian Association of Surgical Gastroenterology, and other chairperson is Dr. Amit Mathur, professor and head medical gastroenterology, NIMS Medical College, Jaipur. And now I would like to request our chairperson to invite our speaker for the next session.
So good afternoon, everyone. I thank Dr. V.K. Kapoor and his team for inviting and conducting this excellent two-day session now. And apparently the speaker has changed. I think it is Dr. Vivek Saraswat. Am I right, Dr. Kapoor?
Yes.
Yeah, so Dr. Vivek Saraswat doesn't need any introduction. He is one of the senior most medical gastroenterologists who has been a professor of SGPGI from the time of its inception, and an eminent endoscopist and an eminent teacher, and also an eminent researcher. I think he has, after PGI stint, he has come and joined with Dr. V.K. Kapoor in the same institute, the parent institute of the Mahatma Gandhi Institute. May I request Dr. Vivek Saraswat to deliver this talk, please.
Thank you very much, Dr. Pradeep. As mentioned, I'm stepping in now to talk about you, and I think with us and in an audience primarily of surgeons and we have been discussing all sorts of surgical procedures all day long. Well, it's about time the endoscopist also came in. And I'll speak to you briefly about the endoscopic management of post-cholecystectomy bile leaks. I think in general, as we know, it's the frequency is about 0.1 to 0.4% in the elective and 0.3 to 0.8% in the emergency setting after lap choles. And the other related problems, I'm sure, is familiar to everyone. Higher in the presence of bile duct stones or in the setting of acute cholecystitis. And I think at least now there seems to be a general agreement that the first choice treatment for a post-cholecystectomy bile leak should be an ERCP with the biliary drainage procedure added on. And the basic principle of the ERCP is that antegrade drainage transpapillary is improved, which allows the leak to seal by abolishing the bilioduodenal gradient by doing a sphincterotomy or placing a stent across the sphincter, and or bridging the defect from which the bile leak has happened. And a combination of abolition of the gradient and bridging the defect is often achieved, especially in the case of common duct injuries, which is the large majority. Essentially, the goal of endotherapy is to stop the bile leak, which not only results in decreasing the duration of an external biliary fistula, related morbidity and mortality. It can also restore normal anatomy and can prevent the development of benign biliary strictures if appropriately carried out and followed up. I think I will not spend too much time on talking about the various classifications of bile duct injuries. To my knowledge, at least about 15 different classification systems have been proposed, and almost all of them very naturally are by the surgeons who handle this problem. The oldest being the Bismuth classification of bile duct injuries in 1982, and the one most commonly used being the Strasberg classification that first came out in 1995, the details of which must be familiar to every surgeon, and I do not bear much reiteration. I'll spend a bit of time talking to you about the endoscopist classifications. The first one of which came out in GUT 1996 from Amsterdam by Bergman and colleagues, which classified bile leaks into A, B, C, and D. A being leaks from the cystic or Luschka or peripheral intrahepatic ducts, which were categorized as minor leaks. Type B injury is generally a major duct leak with or without a stricture, and this also has been categorized as a minor leak. A bile duct stricture without a leak, essentially a benign biliary stricture, which can happen quite early following bile duct injury, is the type C injury according to Bergman, while a transaction injury with or without loss of intervening tissue is a type D injury, which is categorized as a major injury. Newhouse and colleagues have slightly modified this, introducing A1, A2, whether it is the cystic or the Luschka duct, type B being lateral, C is the stricture, and D1, D2 is a transaction. with or without loss of intervening tissue, either in the main duct or on the branch ducts or in aberrant duct. Following this, which is basically a morphologic or an anatomic classification of injury, an interesting classification was proposed by Sandha et al. In 2004 in the GI endoscopy, who categorized bile leaks into high-grade and low-grade leaks. A low-grade bile leak is something that is seen only after opacification of IHBR has been achieved at ERCP, and then you pick up a leak which is happening, which is called a low-grade leak, while a high-grade leak is as soon as you achieve a cannulation, even before you've opacified the intrahepatic ducts, the leak is noted, as is seen here. And this has implications for management as well as outcomes, as I'll show you in the subsequent slides. Another example of a high-grade, of a low-grade leak that is seen here, intrahepatic system nicely visualized before the leak is finally seen, that is picked up from a peripheral duct, while a high-grade leak is seen from a Luschka duct, all right, but it is seen before the intrahepatic system is well opacified. And it has been suggested that while endoscopic sphincterotomy alone may suffice for a low-grade leak, sphincterotomy with a placement of a stent is needed for a high-grade leak, and more about this in subsequent slides. I'll take a minute to take you through a role of what variations in biliary anatomy, congenital variations in biliary anatomy may have an impact on bile duct injuries. This is a paper that we published from SGPGI some time ago. Dr. Vijay Sharma is one of our alumni who is working here in Jaipur, who looked at over 253 ERCP studies and classified the ductal anatomy according to the Chiu et al. Classification, which is shown here. Over half have the type 1 confluence standard 2 ducts forming at the hilum, while about 12% have a type 2 with 3 ducts at the confluence. And type 3A, B, C is variant, RPSD to LHD, RPSD to CHD, and RPSD to the cystic duct. While type 4 and type 5A injuries, these are anatomies. These show a right posterior system duct, the right hepatic duct inserting into the cystic duct, while these are aberrant accessory ducts into the CHD, accessory ducts into the LHD, and so on. So, and the figures in highlighted here show the frequency of these variations. And generally, type 3B to type 5B are the types of injuries where there is a propensity for possibly damaging the aberrant duct and resulting in a bile leak. So that generally about 12 to 13% in this, and a similar about 5 to 10% in a follow-up MRCP study that we did in a larger number subsequently, show variant anatomy which may predispose the individual to bile duct injury during cholecystectomy. And I think the recent introduction of procedures like fluorescent cholangiography during cholecystectomy would help in visualizing such aberrations and minimizing the risk of injury. Now, coming to the endotherapy for bile leaks, as I mentioned, the intention is to abolish the antegrade internal gradient by doing a sphincterotomy. And in case there is downstream obstruction like calculi or narrowing or strictures in the distal bile duct, then placing a stent across these obstructions can abolish the gradients and facilitate antegrade drainage and thus sealing the leak. Similarly, leak may be bridged mechanically, and or sometimes even bridging the papillary sphincter suffices in achieving internal drainage. Also, as we have shown in our experience, I think we have at SGPG, I have recorded about 130 patients with bile duct injuries that I've managed in the last 30 odd years. And about 1/4 of them, when we analyzed our data some years ago, who had an apparent transection injury, we were able to restore continuity between the transected segments by early ERCP, which can be an additional advantage only achieved by the endoscopist. A caveat that must be borne in mind is that the central system, that is the main hepatic branches and the bile duct, must be in continuity with the leaking duct or the segment for the if this strategy of abolishing the gradients to be effective. In case the bile leak is from an isolated or a sequestered segment, as an aberrant RPSD injury, Strasberg B, following percutaneous percutaneous drainage of liver abscesses, etc., then at times the ERCP approach may be unsuccessful. Now, what are the options the endoscopist has? Well, there are several options and which literature abounds, and there is a debate that I'll be coming to in a minute, whether we should do sphincterotomy alone, whether a single plastic stent without sphincterotomy alone should be placed, or whether combining a sphincterotomy with a plastic stent or nasobiliary drainage should be followed. What should be the caliber of the stent? 7 French and 8.5 French stents, that is less than 10 French, are considered a small diameter, while 10 French and 11.5 French stents are considered to be large diameter stents. Again, there are proponents and situations where you can place multiple plastic stents rather than a single transpapillary stent. And finally, lately, fully covered removable self-expanding metal stents have been placed for refractory bile leaks, and I'll come to them by and by. Just a few quick pictures, I hope they show up. This is a dye leaking from a divided Loschka duct with the downstream CBD stones, in which clearance of the stones and placement of the nasobiliary duct within 7 days showed closure of the system. Why an NBD helps is that repeated cholangiograms are easily done through an NBD to document the timing of closure of the leak and removal of the ENBD. This is another patient with a bile duct injury after lap chole with a leak seen in the vicinity of clips that have been placed, and 2 10 French biliary stents placed across showed closure of leak, and at the time of stent removal, as you can see, stricturing has appeared at the site of leak. So a cholangiogram at the time of stent removal is very important, and in those with lateral or transactional injuries, stricturing is very common, and which at the time detected at this time can easily be managed by the endoscopist by placing bundles of plastic stents, which again we have been doing regularly at SGPGI with 90-95% success in restoring normal caliber of the bile duct. Systems that are unsuited for endotherapy, situations that are unsuited for endoscopic therapy, is something that's shown here. A disconnected system, as shown by a balloon occluded cholangiogram, in which you can see the right posterior and the right sided segments are not adequately visualized, and a percutaneous PTC shows a dilated, disconnected right hepatic duct with a leak into the subhepatic biloma, which obviously is not going to respond to endoscopic interventions and needs alternative strategies. Another example of a disconnected system shown here with an ENBD gram placed for drainage and not showing the right-sided ducts at all. That is, these are not in continuity with the drained system and thus cannot be expected to close by endotherapy approach and need alternative approaches. Finally, we have the total transaction, especially delayed presentations, even with balloon occlusion and with the cannula at the summit of the obstruction, not a streak of dye is going across, and obviously the endoscopist is helpless here and cannot do anything very much. Quickly showing you an interesting patient, a 29-year-old patient who had an open cholecystectomy 12 weeks earlier, presented with pain, jaundice and fever, and a progressive distension of the abdomen for the previous 6 weeks. And a CT scan showed a large fluid-filled collections in the lesser sac, estimated to have a capacity of almost 6 liters, and smaller collections in the gastrohepatic omentum, which when they were aspirated turned out to be huge bilomas that had gathered between the leaves of the peritoneum in these compartments. So in an MRCP done at this time showed complete separation, apparent complete separation of the right anterior, posterior and left hepatic ducts, and no continuity with the downstream system. Just as we used to do for a pseudocyst bulging into the stomach, where a biloma bulging on the posterior wall was drained by percutaneous puncture and placement of plastic stents into the biloma. And on the table, about 5 liters of bile was aspirated in this patient with a complete collapse of the swelling that is seen here. You can see these plastic stents here. And then an ERCP in the same session was done, which showed that there was a leak, and we were able to get a stent across the leak into the intrahepatic system. Sorry, that is what is shown here in this arrow. We have a double pigtail stent and an ENBD placed across the stent, and we were fortunate that at this attempt itself, we were able to gain access, suggesting that possibly the MRCP was not accurate. There was no true disconnection. There must have been disconnection, but due to pressure effects during MRCP related to large bilomas, it gave the impression of a disconnected system. 6 weeks later, MRCP after biloma resolution showed this anatomy, and irregular and at places a narrowed bile duct. And this patient was then subjected to endotherapy, in which at 3 monthly intervals, bundles of stents were placed because the last time before removal, about 410 French plastic stents were across the site of bile obstruction. And at the end of treatment, we had a normal caliber and a normal contour of the bile duct at the end of therapy. And now this patient is about 8 years on follow-up, doing perfectly well and is asymptomatic. This is how the endoscopic view is of multiple transpapillary stents placed across the site of bile leak and seen on fluoroscopy. What are the results of endotherapy for post-cholecystectomy bile leaks? This table summarizes series published before December 2004. And as you can see here, the numbers are small. Associated stones were present in a significant number, or strictures, and either a stent or a sphincterotomy plus stent or a nasobiliary drain was done. And the efficacy of closure of bile leaks ranged from 88 to 100% in these small series. A more updated series recently published in 2021, in which large numbers of series, including the Sandha series, where I showed the low grade, high grade classification of 200, Adler series of 5,000 odd, Abbas's series of over 1,000 individuals were summarized, and the cumulative results here again show a 90 to 95% success in closure of bile leaks by various strategies of endotherapy. Now, what are the debates accompanying endotherapy? One is, what is the optimal time point at which ERCP should be attempted in people who patients who present with bile leaks? Which technique should be followed? Sphincterotomy alone, stent alone, or a combination technique? Which stents should be used? Small diameter, large diameter, single or multiple plastic stents? What should be the duration of stenting? And how should we treat so-called refractory biliary leaks? Well, regarding optimal timing, there are about 2 randomized controlled trials, including 500 and over 1,000 patients, who looked at ERCP timing in relation to emergency ERCP within 24 hours of the bile leak appearing, urgent within by day 2 or 3, and expectant after the 3rd day of injury. And they did not find any difference in adverse events following in the 3 different groups, which were very similar. In the adverse, including the requirement for vasopressors, intubation, monitoring, ventilation, dialysis, etc. But a U-shaped mortality curve with the lowest 0% mortality for the urgent ERCP group in day 2 to day 3, vis-a-vis 5% and 2% for the emergency and the expectant group was noted. And at least the authors have explained this by a severity bias, suggesting that patients with greater initial clinical severity are more likely to either undergo emergency ERCP or delayed ERCP after stabilization, and thus the severity of the bile duct and its complications may be more related than the timing of intervention in terms of outcome. And generally, the consensus in these limited data that are available is that interventions for bile leak should not be delayed for longer than 3 to 4 days after the bile leak has been observed, particularly if a high volume of bile is present in external drains. However, at least the Lucknow experience and from most centers that I've spoken to, this is not very relevant to our experience in India. As I showed the previous patient at 6 weeks, less than 10 to 20% of patients present within the first 7 days after bile duct injury at most tertiary centers, 80 to 85% present more than 1 week after injury. So this debate on timing is not very relevant to our situation. So with optimal timing should be once the patient is stabilized, controlled external biliary fistula by percutaneous drainage or subhepatic drains, and at other sites of all collections, bilomas, bile ascites is drained, sepsis, organ dysfunction and related complications are controlled, then as soon as possible, an early ERCP should be attempted. Regarding the investigation, MRCP or MRA, there has been ample discussion earlier session, so I will not dwell on it. Suffice it to say that at least I hold the view that MRCP should be attempted once a patient is stabilized and controlled, so the risk of infective complications as a result of the MRCP are minimized. An attempt should be made to see whether anatomy can be crossed, the fragments can be crossed. Early means the fragment, the lower end and the upper end are likely to be open, and endoscopic intervention is likely to succeed if the endoscopist is experienced and perseveres. Even for forbidding anatomy, the drainage may be doable. Now, what is the optimal technique? Again, no definitive guidelines. ASG, ESG, APSD, multiple endoscopy societies have issued guidelines on multiple aspects of endoscopy. But in this area, so far, no society has come out with a clear-cut set of recommendations or guidelines.
Dr.
Although numerous
Saraswat, I
studies
think,
and a few systematic reviews and meta-analyses are available, the general agreement is that endoscopic sphincterotomy plus stent or stent alone is superior to sphincterotomy alone. Sphincterotomy alone
Dr.
is no longer
Saraswat,
recommended.
May I
Plus-
request you to kindly wind up quickly? We'll need some time for discussion.
I have about 2 more slides which
Yeah.
summarize all the
Yes.
results. So I'll just try and get through them. 90% of minor leaks will close with sphincterotomy and a single plastic stent alone or with sphincterotomy, while high-grade leaks, at least 50% will close with endoscopic sphincterotomy and single stent. A refractory leak is one where there generally is a high-grade leak, or there may be stent displacement, where there is need for more than one intervention despite sphincterotomy and a single plastic stents, and 2/3 of these will close with placement of multiple plastic stents, 3 or more 10 French stents, or with a cumulative diameter of more than 20 French, so like 3 7 French stents, and 100% close with refractory bleeding. Limited data on size, 7 is as good as 10. Plastics at 4 to 8 weeks, metal stents at 3 to 4 weeks should be removed. So in summary, bile leaks may be high grade or low grade. As I've shown according to the SANDA classification, 90% will close with sphincterotomy and a single stent. If it persists, multiple stents offered 100% will close. But if in a small proportion leaks persist, a fully covered metal stent will result in closure of leaks in 100%. While with complex leaks, you might opt to straight away place a fully covered metal stent. Only half will close with the single plastic stents and another 2/3 will close with multiple plastic stents. So in conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, I would suggest that endotherapy should be considered in every patient with bile duct injury in the early stages. Definitive treatment with over 90% success in low-grade leaks, A to D Strasberg is achievable. While even in type D injuries, at least in some centers, up to 25% of major transactional injuries can be treated and the leak can be closed. Check ERCP at removal of stent is important, and so that any strictures that might have appeared in type B, type D injuries, Strasberg B and D can be managed endoscopically. Thank you very much for your attention.
Hello, Dr. Pradeep. Dr. Pradeep, sir, you have to unmute yourself.
Yeah,
You're not
thank you.
audible.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Saraswat, for an excellent talk. I think the point to be highlighted, because a lot of people work in the peripheries of small centers, the aim is to drain the peritoneal cavity first and not drain the bile duct. They get your patient optimized, control the sepsis. So that should be your objective first, and then the bile duct comes in next. And Dr. Saraswat, because before the ERCP era, most of these bile leaks, which we used to see, was very small leaks and used to subside in about 4 to 5 days. And we know that the ERCP is not a simple procedure. ERCP has its own complications, like pancreatitis. The complications rates, even in the best of centers, is around 4 to 5%, 4%, and serious complications of 2%, including a mortality of less than 0.5%. So in a situation where the patient is stable and the bile leak is very minimal, about 100 ml, 100 ml, or 100, 200 ml, do you recommend going in early ERCP, or you wait and watch for about 5 days or a week before you decide on a ERCP? Dr. Saraswat, please.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Pradeep. Yes, you are absolutely right. That first, any collections, any bile in the peritoneum needs to be drained before going anywhere near the bile duct to attempt to stop the leak. Now, regarding minor leaks, low-grade leaks, the minor is in relation not necessarily to volume and duration, but the chances of the rates of success that are achieved by endotherapy, that we call them minor leaks. In fact, cystic duct blowout can result in a prolonged high volume drainage. Now, if in cases that you have specifically said that the volume of drainage is low, yes, there is a situation. And I mean, I think what the surgeon does, I mean, I'm talking from the endoscopist point of view, we seldom get these people who have low volumes of drainage early on. So if a surgeon has a patient in whom there is a diminishing volume of drainage, yes, there could be a point. I think there is some literature to show that up to 10% of bile leaks can close spontaneously. Now, spontaneous closure of leak is definitely a good thing if it happens from a peripheral duct, Luschka duct or a cystic duct. But if spontaneous closure is awaited for and happens when there is a transactional injury of or there is a major lateral injury to the major duct, then at the very least one is risking a stricture or a complete closure of the bile duct with subsequent morbidity. So immediately, yes, the surgeon is happy, bile stops in the drain, the patient goes off, and everybody is happy till eventually the patient shows up with very delayed morbidity, complications, including secondary biliary cirrhosis due to stricture formation. So I agree that observing it for leakage may be all right, but I personally would advocate being clear, what are we leaving behind? Are we leaving behind an injury and we are getting closure from the major duct or a transactional injury, which is going to have long-term adverse sequelae, and the patient will present to you months, if not years later, with in a difficult situation, or it is a peripheral injury.
Thank you. Any questions from the faculty or comments?
Pradeep, there is a question from KJ Singh. There is a comment and then there is a question, if you can take that.
Yeah, KJ Singh has said it's a sheer delight. So I think he's gone back to PGI days, remembering listening to Vivek Saraswat's talk. And his question is, in the algorithm of investigation of a patient having bile in the drain of a patient after lab chole, where does ERCP fit now, before or after MRCP?
Well, number one, ERCP is no longer an investigation. If you're talking about diagnosing the bile leak or localizing the bile leak, for that purpose, ERCP is seldom attempted alone. Whenever ERCP is done, it is done with a therapeutic intent that yes, you will go localize, identify the site of leak, and then try to close the leak by the various techniques that I have mentioned. So I don't know whether it will fit into a diagnostic algorithm. I would say that the algorithm, non-invasive imaging, ultrasound, MRCP and MR imaging may be done. But once a patient has come early and there is active bile leak going on, once it is safe to go in and do an ERCP, and ERCP should be attempted by and large in all patients, because where it succeeds, it is highly effective in not only in closing the leak and cutting short months of morbidity, no tubes hanging out, no drains in the nose. You have completely taken care of the leak. You can restore normal bile duct anatomy in these people and avoid future complications.
And another message, I can't see the name there, transected CBD with drain in situ, when to intervene?
I think that can be covered in the next session by Dr. Adarsh Chaudhary, sir.
Okay.
Prior to that, we can have the prior question by Dr. KJ Singh. Is the cholangiogram of MRCP as precise as ERCP for diagnostic purposes? Is the precision of?
Well, I think it depends, varies from center to center and expertise.
In your
By and
hands.
large, we see ERCP, MRCs, which do not give us sufficient information. Especially if there is a bile ascites or there is a biloma in the region of the bile duct injury, then the anatomy is obscured. And even otherwise, when that is there, I think as you saw in the previous patient, I don't know how well those pictures came out, a large biloma has created the impression that there is a discontinuity. And if you were going to be judging by MRCP or it is discontinuous, there is no point, no use doing ERCP in this person, because the ducts are so widely separated. I don't think we would have achieved the result we did. And that is not an isolated case. We have done it on several occasions. In fact, while transactions can be taken up after Adarsh's talk, as I mentioned, and I didn't show the data here because obviously there was not enough time. But in about 47 odd patients with complete transaction where we attempted ERCP on these principles, in about 14, we were able to bridge the leak, restore continuity between the fragments, place stents. Stricturing happened, but the stricture could be managed with a bundle of plastic stents. And eventually, after 1 year, the patient had a completely normal bile duct from a situation of transaction.
I think the take-home message from what Dr. Supriya had presented in the last session, as well as by Dr. Saraswat, is that whenever there is a biloma, MRCP is not the investigation of choice. Get it drained. Once the drain is, the collection is out, then the MRCP can be helpful. And maybe depending upon the injury, you can plan for a ERCP if it is required. Dr. Pradeep, I think you can just conclude the session.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Vivek, for an excellent talk.
You're welcome.
And I think I'll hand over the mic to the organizing committee. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for your nice and elaborative talk on ERCP and its uses in bile duct leak.